I still remember the moment it happened. 1 second, the water was calm, the horizon stretched endlessly, and laughter floated over the yacht like champagne bubbles. The next second, I was falling, shoved off the deck by someone I trusted more than my own instincts. The cold hit me before the realization did. And when I surfaced, gasping and clutching the side, the truth sank in faster than the water ever could. They thought I was gone, that they had won, that I would never see it coming. Before I dive deeper, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon so you never miss stories like this. Trust me, you'll want to hear every twist of this one. It all began months earlier, with the subtle kind of smiles that hide intentions. My daughter-in-law, Marissa, had always been charming to everyone's face, but I'd learned to read between the lines. The way she lingered just a second too long in conversations, the slight smirk when she talked about wealth, the way she positioned herself close to my son when decisions were made. On the surface, she seemed sweet, polite, caring. Beneath that, she was calculating. I remember the first red flag clearly. It was during a weekend brunch at their waterfront home. I had brought a batch of my homemade lemon tarts, something I'd perfected over years. Marissa took one bite, smiled politely, and then, in front of everyone, remarked casually, "Well, they're edible." The room laughed awkwardly. My son glanced at me, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, but Marissa's smile widened, triumphant. That moment didn't just sting, it revealed a side of her I couldn't ignore. Over the following months, I started noticing patterns. Gifts I gave were ignored or belittled. My advice was subtly twisted into criticisms. Family gatherings became performances, where she controlled the narrative, making sure my influence was minimized. She wasn't just undermining me in small ways, she was building momentum, and I could see where it was leading. The yacht trip was supposed to be a celebration of my son's latest business milestone. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was actually Marissa's stage, her playground, a carefully orchestrated environment where she could make her moves unnoticed. From the moment we boarded, she was unusually attentive to my son, laughing a little too hard at his jokes, brushing past me as if I were invisible. The crew treated her politely, which she leveraged effortlessly, giving me that small, nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The day was perfect, or so it seemed. Sunlight sparkled on the water, cocktails flowed, and my son's friends mingled easily. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I stepped onto the upper deck to get some fresh air. The breeze was warm, the sound of the waves hypnotic, and then, out of nowhere, a sharp shove from behind sent me off balance. I barely had time to grasp the rail before my feet left the deck. Water rushed up to meet me, icy and merciless. When I surfaced, coughing and gasping, I realized with a sinking heart that no one was rushing to help. My son's laughter floated down from above, accompanied by Marissa's triumphant smile. They thought I was gone, that the world had swallowed me in one careless moment. The yacht continued its path, but I had other plans. I clung to the hull, exhausted but burning with a clarity I'd never felt before. In those moments, I understood something vital. This wasn't just an accident, it was calculated. And if they thought this would silence me, they were gravely mistaken. Over the next few days, I observed carefully. I didn't rush to confront anyone. Instead, I watched, listened, and cataloged everything. Conversations, slips of the tongue, patterns in behavior. Marissa was bold, flaunting wealth and influence, assuming my absence had removed me from the equation entirely. But I was still present, just invisible. I saw how she tried to bend my son's decisions to her favor, how she navigated social circles to ensure her own dominance. I began to formulate a plan, not out of anger, but out of precision. She had underestimated one thing: my patience, my understanding of human nature, and my ability to wait until the perfect moment. There was no rush, no impulsive confrontation. Every smile I gave her from that point on was layered with intention, every casual remark a probe, every neutral gesture a calculated placement. The real turning point came when I started to gather allies, quietly. Family members who had been sidelined or subtly manipulated by Marissa began to notice my calm demeanor, my careful attention. They didn't know what I knew yet, but they began to trust me again, slowly gravitating toward the quiet center of control I was reclaiming. The yacht incident became less about physical danger and more about the psychological game. She thought she was untouchable, but I was playing a deeper game, one she couldn't even detect. By the time the next social gathering arrived, a gala hosted at the family estate, I was ready. Not with confrontation, not with accusations, but with subtle maneuvers that shifted perception and control. Marissa expected compliance, but I had rewritten the rules. Every move I made that evening was intentional. The way I positioned myself in conversations, the questions I asked, the way I acknowledged my son's friends. She noticed, of course, and her reaction was instantaneous. A flicker of irritation, a flash of panic, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She was used to playing the game against passive participants, not someone awake and calculating at every turn. The night ended with the family dispersing, and I left with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Not revenge yet, but momentum. I had planted seeds, observed reactions, and prepared the ground. Marissa's confidence had cracks now, subtle but real, and I knew with absolute certainty that the next phase was coming and she wouldn't see it until it was too late. The days that followed the gala were a delicate dance. I moved like a shadow, quiet and unnoticed, while Marissa reveled in the illusion of her power. She had no idea that every word, every gesture, every laugh she shared was being cataloged, stored, and later to be used in the only way that mattered, to reveal the truth at the perfect moment. It wasn't immediate revenge I sought. That would have been sloppy, and she was meticulous. If I had acted too soon, she would have shifted, adapted, and perhaps destroyed the subtle advantage I was cultivating. No, patience was my weapon, and silence was my shield. Every interaction became a study, a test of her character, her alliances, her true nature. I began to notice things more clearly than ever before. Marissa's facade, once impenetrable, had begun to crack in the smallest ways. The way her smile faltered when certain relatives approached, the subtle eye rolls she tried to mask, the micro-expressions of irritation when her control was challenged even slightly. I cataloged these moments mentally, each one another thread to pull later. My son, bless him, was unaware of much of what was happening. He had always been loving, protective, and trusting, sometimes to a fault. His adoration for Marissa blinded him to her manipulation. But I didn't resent him. I only understood the role he was playing in her narrative and prepared to reveal the full picture in a way that would shock him, yes, but ultimately free him. I scheduled my next encounter carefully. It would appear casual, benign, even generous. I invited Marissa to a private dinner at my place, ostensibly to discuss family matters and upcoming plans. She accepted with her usual poise, unaware that this was not a friendly meeting. It was a stage I had meticulously set for the reveal of her true self. When she arrived, she carried that same air of superiority, the practiced smile, the subtle tilt of her head that made it clear she thought she was in control. I greeted her warmly, all the while observing every micro-expression. Her eyes flicked toward the dining table, expecting opulence. I had kept it modest, simple, almost deliberately underwhelming. That small detail was my first test. "You always keep things simple," she said, her tone light but edged with that familiar superiority. I smiled, calm and composed. "I like simplicity," I replied. "It reveals character more than extravagance ever could." She laughed softly, but there was a hesitation, almost imperceptible. That pause was the crack in her armor, and I noticed it immediately. As we dined, I spoke casually, weaving questions and stories designed to draw her out, to reveal her thought patterns without her realizing she was being analyzed. I asked about her recent projects, her travels, her ambitions, listening not just to the words, but to the intent behind them. I noted the subtle ways she positioned herself as central, the unspoken expectation that admiration and deference were owed to her. Halfway through the evening, I made the first calculated move. "Marissa," I began, my voice calm, measured, "have you ever wondered what it would be like if no one took your side for granted?" Her fork paused mid-air. Her smile faltered, almost imperceptibly. "What do you mean?" she asked, attempting to mask the sudden tension in her tone. I leaned back slightly, letting the silence stretch. "I mean, if people observed every move you made, not for charm, not for smiles, but for truth, how would that feel?" She laughed, trying to dismiss it. I think most people do observe carefully." "Do they?" I asked gently. "Or do they just assume what they want to assume?" She shifted in her seat, her practiced calm showing the tiniest fissure. I had noticed something in that moment, a flicker of awareness that I had planted carefully. It was subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but I could see it. She knew, in some corner of her mind, that the game was shifting. The following weeks became an intricate study of patterns and alliances. I maintained the appearance of cordiality while gathering observations that would become invaluable. Friends and relatives subtly began to approach me privately, seeking guidance or simply sharing their discomfort about Marissa's dominance. They didn't realize that they were, unknowingly, feeding the foundation of my strategy without ever revealing my true plan. Meanwhile, Marissa grew bolder in her attempts to assert dominance, not realizing that her overconfidence was being documented mentally, stored carefully for the perfect reveal. Her arrogance became her undoing. She treated me as though I were irrelevant, invisible, a shadow she could ignore at will. Yet, with every dismissive remark, every attempt to belittle or undermine, she was digging her own trap deeper. The real challenge, however, was my son. I couldn't expose everything at once without risking his trust or causing unnecessary emotional chaos. He needed to witness the truth unfold in a way that would allow him to process, understand, and ultimately choose sides not out of manipulation, but clarity. So I waited, timed my revelations, and orchestrated encounters to maximize impact. One afternoon, an opportunity arose I had been anticipating. The family was planning a yacht outing, an event Marissa saw as a platform to cement her dominance. I arrived quietly, blending in, appearing as though I were simply participating in the festivities. She greeted me with that same calculated charm, unaware that I had anticipated every move she might make. As the yacht cruised gently over the waves, I watched her interact with my son, friends, and colleagues. She was confident, almost smug, believing she had the upper hand. The moment was perfect. I waited, patient and calm, until the perfect opportunity to subtly manipulate the environment presented itself, not in a dramatic gesture, but through quiet influence. Strategic questions here, a small redirection there, a casual comment that cast doubt on her credibility. Each move went unnoticed by everyone except me. By the time the evening sun dipped low on the horizon, her facade had begun to waver. She was aware of the subtle shifts, but could not place their origin. The yacht, which had seemed her stage, was no longer under her complete control. I had orchestrated the interactions in a way that revealed small truths without raising alarms, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of others. It was during that quiet period of observation that I noticed the final piece of the puzzle, her reliance on my son's perception. She had underestimated the bond he shared with me, the silent understanding, the trust, the years of unspoken guidance. It was time to leverage that bond, to use it as the final instrument in revealing the truth she had worked so hard to conceal. I approached him privately, under the guise of casual conversation. He was unaware, of course, but attentive as ever. I spoke carefully, guiding him to reflect on Marissa's behavior, her manipulations, and the subtle signs he might have overlooked. I asked questions, not making judgments, allowing him to piece together the reality himself. His eyes widened slowly, recognition dawning as the dots connected, forming a pattern that had previously been invisible to him. By the time the yacht returned to the harbor, the subtle groundwork had been laid. I had prepared the environment, the observations, and most importantly, the perception of my son. Marissa believed she had orchestrated the perfect evening. She was blind to the fact that the person she had sought to diminish, the person she had nearly eliminated from the equation entirely, was now fully awake, aware, and strategically positioned to reveal everything in the most effective, undeniable manner possible. The following morning, I woke early, long before anyone else stirred. The yacht was moored, the harbor quiet, and the sunlight danced softly across the water. I sat on the balcony, watching the waves, savoring a calm I hadn't felt in months. This was the moment before the storm, the tension, the anticipation, the slow burn of truth ready to ignite. I knew exactly what needed to happen, and I had prepared every detail meticulously. Patience had always been my ally. Now it would deliver justice with precision. I reviewed every interaction from the previous day, every subtle reaction, every micro-expression. Marissa had been blind to the way others observed her, but I had been anything but. My son's eyes, once clouded by affection and trust, now flickered with hesitation, awareness, and doubt. That subtle shift was the key. Once he realized the patterns, the manipulation, the betrayal, the entire truth would unfold naturally, without me having to force it. The family gathered later in the day at the estate for a casual brunch. I entered with calm confidence, carrying nothing but myself. Marissa approached immediately, offering the practiced smile, the poised gestures, the small talk designed to disarm, but I was immune. I responded with polite warmth, but my attention was selective. I listened, I observed, I waited for the right moment. It came when she began recounting the yacht trip, speaking casually about my accidental fall. The words slipped from her lips like honey, smooth and calculated, intended to charm everyone into believing the incident had been nothing more than a clumsy misstep. She didn't expect resistance. She didn't expect anyone to question her narrative. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm and measured. I said, quietly, ensuring the room was listening, "It's interesting how different perspectives can be." Her smile faltered for the briefest moment. I continued, maintaining eye contact with her, not out of aggression, but as a gentle assertion of presence. It's fascinating how someone can assume control over a story while overlooking the people who were truly present. The room grew still, subtle glances exchanged between relatives who had previously been unsure where they stood. Marissa's practiced charm wavered. That tiny flicker of doubt was exactly what I had been waiting for. Over the next hour, I guided the conversation skillfully, weaving anecdotes, questions, and reflections that highlighted subtle manipulations without ever explicitly naming them. I spoke of integrity, of honesty, of the importance of observing actions rather than accepting words blindly. Every story, every example, every gentle comment chipped away at the foundation Marissa had built. She tried to interject, tried to charm, tried to redirect, but the room's focus had subtly shifted. The allies she counted on were now questioning, reconsidering, observing in new ways. By the time dessert arrived, the energy had completely shifted. Marissa's smile was tight, measured, and increasingly forced. She attempted to regain control, raising her voice slightly, asserting her presence, but it was ineffective. The seeds of doubt had already taken root. Conversations she tried to dominate veered elsewhere, eyes flicking towards me, waiting for my guidance, my assessment. After brunch, I suggested a short walk with my son. Alone, he finally allowed himself to speak freely. "Mom, did she mean it?" he asked hesitantly, referring to the manipulations he had begun to notice. I shook my head slowly, my tone calm but firm. "No," I said. "She didn't mean well. She's been shaping perceptions to her advantage. But now you see it too, don't you? His eyes widened as the pattern clicked. The manipulations, the subtle control, the constant undermining, it all became painfully clear. And he didn't need me to spell everything out. He had observed, and the truth was undeniable. That afternoon, I called another family member, a cousin who had remained neutral throughout the previous events. We walked through the estate's quiet paths, discussing casual topics, yet weaving in subtle truths that exposed Marissa's behavior without confrontation. Every word, every story, every suggestion planted additional seeds of understanding. By the end of the day, those who had once been hesitant began to see her in a new light. The evening brought a family dinner, and the culmination of the psychological strategy I had been orchestrating. Marissa arrived with her usual confidence, unaware that the room had shifted. The subtle glances, the questions, the quiet reflections, all of them converged to highlight her overreach, her manipulations, and her misjudgments. I waited patiently for the right moment. The final act was not dramatic, it was not explosive. It was quiet, deliberate, and devastating in its precision. During dinner, as she began to assert herself in conversation, I asked a question about the yacht trip, phrased as innocuously as possible. "Do you remember how that afternoon went? I've been thinking about it a lot lately." Her eyes flickered with a faint hesitation, searching for a narrative, for an escape, for validation. I continued, calmly and softly. "It's fascinating how one person can assume control over the story, while others perceive it entirely differently." Silence filled the room. Everyone listened, but no one spoke. Marissa's eyes darted, her mouth opening slightly as she sought a response, a way to assert dominance. But there was none. The truth was now an invisible presence, undeniable and inescapable. I smiled quietly, not triumphantly, not maliciously, but with the calm satisfaction of someone who has waited, observed, and acted with precision. "I suppose we all see things differently," I said, letting the statement hang in the air. Her composure faltered. Small slips, once unnoticed, became glaringly obvious. Those who had doubted her, who had been unsure of what to believe, now saw the pattern clearly. Every subtle manipulation, every casual lie, every attempt to dominate or belittle, it was all revealed in the way people now observed and reacted. By the end of the evening, the tension was palpable. Marissa's control had slipped entirely. She realized finally that her assumptions, that I had been powerless, that my son's perception was unquestioned, that the family's trust could be shaped at will, were false. And it was too late. The web she had spun so carefully had been gently dismantled without a single harsh word or dramatic confrontation. Later, when the family dispersed, I spoke briefly with my son. "You understand now," I said, my voice steady, "why patience, observation, and clarity are more powerful than anger or confrontation." He nodded, the weight of understanding settling over him. I never saw how much she was manipulating. "Sometimes," I said softly, "we have to wait, watch, and let the truth reveal itself. That is the only way to ensure it has real impact." As I walked through the quiet halls of the estate that night, I reflected on the days, weeks, and months that had led to this moment. The careful observations, the subtle maneuvers, the patience, it had all been worth it. Marissa had been revealed not through confrontation, but through clarity, through the slow unveiling of truth. I knew that the next steps would be even more decisive. The stage was now set, the players positioned, and the final revelation would soon occur. Marissa had no idea what was coming. She believed she had survived, that her control had remained intact, that her manipulations were hidden behind layers of charm and deceit. She was gravely mistaken. The morning was unusually calm, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the finale. The yacht was docked quietly in the marina, the water reflecting the soft sunlight in gentle ripples. I stood at the edge, looking out over the horizon, my thoughts clear and focused. Every move, every observation, every patient maneuver over the past months had led to this moment. Marissa had no idea the storm was about to hit. She believed she had survived, that her control had remained intact, that her manipulations were hidden behind layers of charm and deceit. She was gravely mistaken. The plan was simple, yet devastatingly effective. I had learned long ago that revenge need not be explosive to be unforgettable. It required precision, timing, and an understanding of human psychology. Marissa relied on assumptions about my reactions, my silence, my relationship with my son. She assumed compliance, assumed power, assumed that her illusions were untouchable, and all of that would crumble today. My son was by my side, his expression a mixture of apprehension and clarity. He had finally pieced together the subtle manipulations, the inconsistencies, the carefully masked deceptions. He had observed, reflected, and understood, and now he was ready, not only to witness, but to stand alongside the truth. We boarded the yacht again, ostensibly for a family celebration. Marissa greeted us with her usual poised smile, unaware of the psychological trap she was stepping into. Her confidence was palpable, her aura commanding, but beneath the surface I could see the tiniest flickers of hesitation, tiny cracks that had been invisible to the untrained eye until now. The gathering was casual, with laughter, conversation, and the gentle clinking of glasses. Marissa moved through the room, charming, smiling, asserted herself with subtle dominance. She did not realize that every gesture, every word, every calculated smile was being noted and interpreted not as manipulation, but as evidence. Evidence of intent, of design, of betrayal. I waited patiently, observing how she interacted, how others responded, and how my son's demeanor had shifted. The subtle alignment of glances, the questions carefully phrased to reveal discrepancies in her narrative, all of these had been planned weeks in advance. The difference between a casual social gathering and a controlled stage was nearly imperceptible, but the results were profound. Finally, the moment came. Marissa approached my son, speaking in that tone she thought would charm him, asserting her influence as she had countless times before. I leaned forward slightly, allowing my presence to be felt without overt interference. My son, now fully aware of the patterns, responded differently, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with calm, measured observation. "Marissa," he began quietly, "I've been thinking about the yacht trip, about everything that's happened since then." Her smile faltered. She attempted to maintain her poise, but there was a flicker of unease. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone light but edged with uncertainty. He looked at me briefly, a subtle acknowledgement passing between us. "I mean the way certain actions were taken, how stories were shaped, and how words were chosen carefully to create a certain perception." The room grew silent. Conversations paused, glances shifted, the subtle energy of realization spreading like a ripple across water. Marissa's composure wavered, the illusion of control slipping further with every word. I spoke next, my voice calm, deliberate, and steady. "It's fascinating how people assume they can shape reality simply by controlling appearances. Yet truth has a way of asserting itself, slowly, quietly, but inevitably." Her eyes widened slightly. She realized finally that the net had closed around her, not violently, not dramatically, but inexorably. Every whispered word, every small deception, every carefully orchestrated manipulation had been observed and recorded in human memory, and the consequence was now unfolding. "You see," I continued, maintaining the gentle cadence of a calm storyteller, "it's not about anger. It's not about revenge in the way people imagine. It's about truth, recognition, and accountability. Silence, patience, observation, They reveal more than confrontation ever could. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but the words failed her. The room was now fully aware. Those who had once admired her charm began to see the subtle manipulations, the casual dismissals, the control she exercised. The truth, slow burning but undeniable, had reached them, and they could no longer turn away. My son added, his voice steady and firm, "I had assumed everything was as it seemed, but now I understand, and I see clearly the difference between genuine care and calculated influence." The shift was complete. Marissa's face, once composed and confident, now betrayed the faintest traces of panic and disbelief. She had underestimated the power of patient observation, of calm insight, of the strategic use of knowledge. She had assumed her control was permanent, that her designs were invisible, that no one could see through the mask. And in that quiet realization, she understood that her reign of subtle manipulation was over. There was no need for loud confrontation, no need for drama, no need for accusations. The truth, carried silently by those who had witnessed it, had done its work. The web she had spun so carefully had been dismantled by human awareness, perception, and patience. Later, as the family disembarked from the yacht, the dynamics had irrevocably shifted. Marissa's posture, her smile, her habitual control, they were no longer effective. She had lost the narrative, lost the trust, and most importantly, lost the invisible authority she had assumed. I walked beside my son, our steps measured, our silence comfortable. We didn't need to boast or revel in the outcome. The truth had already spoken, and the consequences were clear. The power of observation, of patience, of carefully timed revelation had achieved what confrontation could never do. In the days that followed, family interactions subtly transformed. Those who had been unsure began to align with honesty, clarity, and genuine relationships rather than superficial charm. Marissa, now aware of the exposure, could no longer manipulate unnoticed. She attempted subtle adjustments, but her efforts were ineffective. The game had changed, and the rules were no longer in her favor. I realized then that true power is not loud or aggressive. It is calm, deliberate, and rooted in understanding human nature. Revenge is most potent when it is invisible, when it operates quietly within the boundaries of observation and patience. The greatest revelations do not come from force, but from clarity, insight, and timing. Finally, the day ended with a quiet satisfaction that went beyond personal triumph. It was the acknowledgement of justice, of balance, of the subtle but inevitable consequences of betrayal. Marissa had underestimated me, underestimated the power of patience, and underestimated the human mind's ability to discern truth. And in doing so, she had allowed herself to be revealed, not by force, but by her own choices. I stood once more on the yacht's deck as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water in hues of gold and crimson. The calm was profound, almost reverential. I smiled, not in triumph over another, but in acknowledgement of clarity, insight, and the restoration of order. In the end, the most powerful form of revenge had been silent, strategic, and human. It had relied not on objects, not on documents, not on dramatic gestures, but on observation, understanding, and patience. And when the truth revealed itself, it was undeniable, irrevocable, and perfectly just. Marissa never fully recovered the influence she had wielded. The family had seen her for who she truly was, and the subtle shifts in perception were permanent. And I, having endured, observed, and acted with precision, finally reclaimed peace, clarity, and the quiet satisfaction of justice achieved without malice, only truth.